Welcome back to the Real News Network, coming to you from Boston. We're talking to Howard Zinn. Hi.
Thank you.
The email we get most often is, why aren't you guys doing the 9/11 story? It can go anywhere from 9/11 was an inside job, why aren't you doing that story? I would say more often now the emails are saying, will you report on those people who support the idea of an independent inquiry around the events of 9/11? Who caused it and what? The whole issue of incompetence, negligence, or even criminal involvement. What do you make of this whole issue of the need to investigate what really happened around 9/11?
There are some issues which are interesting, but which are diversions from what we really have to do. This is one of them. I doubt that an independent commission, and I grant that we don't know all the facts about 9/11, and we could probably learn a lot more. And maybe there was a conspiracy. Who knows? But I believe it's one of those issues that can never be fully answered, like the assassination of John F. Kennedy. It will go on and on and on. People will write books and talk about it. It will be an enormous waste of good energy. So it's not that I doubt any of the doubters. It's not that I doubt that there are very troubling questions to be answered. I just don't think that it leads anywhere.
Well, they would answer back that much of today's foreign policy, not just Bush, but Obama as well, talks about, for example, the objective of the Afghan policy is to make sure 9/11 doesn't happen again. We got to make sure it's not a base for terrorism. Like a lot of the underlying rationale or mythology, however you want to describe it, still has its roots in 9/11 in terms of today's policy, and that if in fact it turned out, if you go like to this one end of the spectrum of what may have been, if it turns out that the leaders of the Republican administration, perhaps with some collaboration of some of the leading Democrats, which is possible, knew something was coming and decided not to do something about it, or you can go to other ends of the spectrum, which talk about bombs in the buildings and so on. The one fact we do know is that Condoleezza Rice did open up a document that said Osama bin Laden plans to attack America and seems not to have done anything about it. Said at the 9/11 Commission that she was going to task all the FBI offices, and then later the 9/11 Commission found out she didn't really task all the FBI offices, and literally nothing was done in a summer where her own national security czar was saying our hair was on fire, so on and so on and so on. If it turns out there actually was a decision that attack ain't so bad, isn't that a rather important thing to know for American people?
You say if it turns out.
And one would never be able to know.
Nothing will never turn. It will never turn out. That is, it will never be clear. It's one of those situations where nobody will be able to prove anything, and it will lead us nowhere. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be concerned about 9/11. 9/11 is crucial. We should talk about 9/11, but not about who knew in advance what. We should talk about how 9/11 was used by the Bush administration, however it started, whoever was behind it. The important thing about 9/11 is that 9/11 was used as an excuse by the Bush administration to go to war. And furthermore, that they have not investigated why 9/11 took place. They have not. This is something that should be asked. What should be asked is, why are there people in the world who want to blow up our buildings, who want to scare the American people, who want to do terrorist? Why are there such people? If you start to ask that question, then that would lead you into, well, is it possible that there are people in the world, all over the world, who are absolutely enraged by American foreign policy? There's a lot of evidence for that. That's a lot easier to prove than who conspired to plant bombs and so on and so forth. That's what we should be concentrating on. We should be concentrating on in what way is American foreign policy responsible for the terrorism that exists in the minds and hearts of so many people in the world, and which in a small number of them results in violent acts.
And a lot of that conversation has been had. There's been a lot of discussion about blowback. There's been a lot of, maybe not enough in the mainstream media, but even in the mainstream media, there's been some conversation. Even Bush at some point before his term was over talked a bit about how U.S. foreign policy had been connected to these events, even though at the time they tried to close down that whole conversation completely. But if one looks at the connection between the Pakistani ISI, the Saudi intelligence, some people suggest Mossad, we know there were messages coming warning the United States that something was happening from other intelligence agencies. If in fact there was a decision made, I mean, and you say, your point is maybe it was, but how do you prove it? But the fact that hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of Americans and people around the world are still believe such things, doesn't that actually suggest an inquiry would be, as much as it could achieve, would be worthwhile?
Yeah, I think it would divert our energy from the real inquiry. The real inquiry is, in what way has American foreign policy inflamed and antagonized people all over the world to the point of creating terrorists? That's the question that should be investigated. And the other question about the conspiracy and who knew about it and who didn't do anything about it, that to me is a dead end. It's a diversion, and I think it leads us away from what we should be doing.
Thanks very much for joining us. Thank you for joining us on the Real News Network. There are times when reality just asserts itself, in spite of the haze created by television news and entertainment. Sometimes crisis rips a tear in the fabric of myth and propaganda. Now a profound economic crisis has ripped asunder the American dream itself. Millions of people losing jobs and homes. They lack proper health care and any real sense of security. Since 2001, workers' wages have fallen or remained stagnant, even though worker productivity has risen almost 33%. By 2006, the top 1% of households were receiving 23% of all pre-tax income, more than double what it was in the 1970s. It's the greatest concentration of income since 1928. As unemployment rises, we need to know why this crisis is happening and what we can do to defend ourselves. Why are wages so low? Why is the society so laden with debt? Is it in ordinary Americans' interest to have $1 trillion military budget to project power across the globe? Corporate television news won't ask these questions, let alone try to find answers. Only a truly independent news network can tackle these questions with courage and with ordinary people's interests in mind. We need a news network that's independent of corporations, governments, and political parties. We need the real news. But there won't be a real news network unless we raise substantial funds right away. The current financial crisis has hit our funding hard. Together, we do have the power to turn it around. There are already hundreds of thousands of people watching the real news every month. If everyone pitches in, we can build an internet and cable television network that will change the face of media forever. You can organize house parties, talk to friends at school and at work, send email blasts and spread the word. Distribute this video to everyone you know. Pick up the phone and call a few friends and suggest they visit therealnews.com. Invest just 10 minutes a day to ask friends and colleagues to join the campaign to create a truly independent source of internet and television news. Together, we can build this network. Just 50,000 people at $10 a month gets us to our first level of sustainability. You can help us reach this goal, and when we do, we'll move to television in millions of homes across North America. Help us reach an audience in the millions. Please contribute generously. Spread the word. Let's make the Real News television network a reality.
Your tax-deductible donation makes it possible. Please contribute at therealnews.com.